Wyoming Territory, 1873. A late autumn storm lashed the prairies with sleet and bitter wind as Valerie Harris clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her 5 children huddled close against the biting cold. Their wagon had broken an axle 10 miles back, and the meager supplies she'd managed to salvage were quickly dwindling. With nowhere else to turn and night falling fast, she spotted a distant light through the driving snow. A ranch house standing alone against the wilderness, their last hope for shelter. "Come along, children," she whispered, her voice nearly lost in the howling wind. Just a little further now. Quinn Quincy had just stoked the fire in his ranch house when he heard the faint knock at his door. At 24, he was younger than most ranchers in Johnson County, but 4 years of hard work had transformed his grandfather's struggling homestead into one of the most promising cattle operations in the territory. He opened the door to find a woman with 5 children, all soaked to the bone and shivering. "Please," the woman said, her voice trembling as much from fear as from cold. "Our wagon broke down miles back. We've been walking for hours. I hate to impose, but my children." Quinn's eyes met hers, a striking hazel that somehow managed to shine despite her obvious exhaustion. Her chestnut hair, though partially hidden beneath a sodden bonnet, framed a face that might have been carved by angels. High cheekbones, full lips, and a straight, delicate nose. "Ma'am, you and your children come in right away," Quinn said, stepping aside. "No one gets turned away in weather like this." Valerie Harris had never meant to find herself at a stranger's mercy. 6 months ago, she had been comfortably settled in Ohio with her husband Thomas, a carpenter of some renown. Then fever had swept through their town, taking Thomas and leaving her with 5 children to raise alone. The letter from her cousin in Oregon promising work and a fresh start had seemed like providence. Now, watching her children, Emma, age 10, the twins James and Joseph, 8, Sarah, 6, and little Daniel, barely 4, huddle near this stranger's fire, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Quinn moved efficiently around his modest ranch house, pulling blankets from trunks and setting a pot of coffee to boil. His tall, lean frame moved with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to handling everything himself. His sandy brown hair fell across his forehead as he bent to add another log to the fire, revealing a face too handsome for someone who lived so isolated. Clean-shaven save for the faintest shadow of stubble, his features were strong but not harsh, a straight nose, square jaw, and eyes the color of a summer sky. "I'm Quinn Quincy," he said, handing Valerie a steaming mug of coffee. "This is my ranch, the Double Q." "Valerie Harris," she replied, gratefully accepting the warm drink. "These are my children, Emma, James, Joseph, Sarah, and Daniel. My husband passed 6 months ago. We're heading to Oregon to stay with my cousin." Quinn nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Harris. You're welcome to stay until the storm passes. It might be a few days. These early winter storms can be the worst." As Valerie helped her children into dry clothes Quinn provided, old shirts of his that swallowed their small frames, she couldn't help but notice the lack of feminine touches in the ranch house. No curtains adorned the windows, no quilts brightened the beds, and the kitchen contained only the barest necessities. "You live here alone, Mr. Quincy?" she asked as she tucked Daniel into a makeshift bed near the fire. "Just Quinn, please. And yes, it's just me since my grandfather passed 3 years back. Have a few hands who work the cattle, but they bunk in the bunkhouse a ways from here." What he didn't mention was how the loneliness sometimes pressed in on him like a physical weight, especially during the long winter months when the snow cut him off from the nearest town of Buffalo, 30 miles away. That night, as the storm raged outside, Quinn lay awake in the small side room he'd insisted Valerie take while he bedded down near the children in the main room. He listened to the wind howling through the eaves and thought about the strange turn his life had taken in the space of a single evening. 6 months of not speaking more than a dozen words to anyone but his ranch hands or his horse, and now his quiet home was filled with the soft breathing of 5 children and their beautiful mother. Mother. The word caught in his mind. She was a widow, not much younger than himself by the look of her, with 5 mouths to feed and a perilous journey ahead. Something protective stirred in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced since his grandfather had fallen ill. But what truly kept him awake was a question that nagged at him. What kind of woman would attempt to cross the Wyoming Territory in late autumn with 5 young children and no man to protect them? Morning brought a temporary lull in the storm. Quinn rose before dawn, as was his habit, to find little Daniel sitting cross-legged by the dying fire, solemnly feeding it twigs one by one. "Morning, partner," Quinn said softly, trying not to wake the others. "You're up early." Daniel looked up with solemn eyes. "Mama says I'm the man now. Men get up first to make the fire." Something twisted in Quinn's chest. The boy couldn't be older than 4, yet here he was, trying to shoulder a man's responsibilities. "That's right, men do that," Quinn agreed, sitting beside him. "But you know what? On my ranch, men work together. How about you help me get breakfast started before your mama and the others wake up?" By the time Valerie emerged from the side room, her hair loosely braided and her borrowed dress, one of Quinn's old shirts belted at the waist with a length of rope, hanging past her knees, Quinn and Daniel had bacon sizzling in the pan and biscuits in the oven. "Good morning," Quinn said, tipping an imaginary hat. "Your man of the house has been helping me with breakfast." Valerie's smile held both gratitude and something wistful. "I see that. Thank you, Mr. Quincy." "Quinn, you've been more than kind. Just doing what anyone would," Quinn replied, though they both knew that wasn't necessarily true. The West could be a harsh place, and not everyone would welcome a widow and 5 children into their home, storm or no storm. Over breakfast, Quinn learned more about the Harris family. Thomas had been a skilled carpenter whose death had left them not only heartbroken but destitute. The house and workshop had been mortgaged, and the bank had shown little mercy. Valerie's cousin in Oregon, a schoolteacher, had offered her a position as an assistant and a place to stay until she could get on her feet. "It's our best hope," Valerie explained as she helped Sarah cut her bacon. "I can sew, cook, and I have some education. But in Ohio, there were too many memories, too many debts." Quinn nodded thoughtfully. "That's a mighty long journey to make just before winter sets in. The mountain passes will be snowed in soon, if they aren't already." Fear flickered in Valerie's eyes. "We have no choice. Our funds are limited, and we can't afford to winter anywhere between here and Oregon." Quinn was about to respond when a particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows, sending little Daniel scrambling into his mother's lap. The brief respite was ending. The storm was picking up again. "I don't think you'll be traveling anywhere for at least a few days," Quinn said, looking out at the swirling snow. "The trail will be impassable until this blows over." Later that morning, Quinn trudged through knee-deep snow to check on his cattle and inform his 3 ranch hands about their unexpected guests. The oldest hand, Hank Wilcox, a grizzled man of 50 who'd been with the ranch since Quinn's grandfather's time, pulled him aside. "Boss, you sure about this? A pretty widow and 5 kids just happened to show up at your door in the middle of nowhere." Quinn's brow furrowed. "What are you suggesting, Hank?" The older man shrugged. "There's been talk of con artists working this territory. Woman and children gain a man's sympathy, then clean him out first chance they get." For a moment, Quinn felt a flicker of doubt. He'd worked too hard to build up this ranch to lose it to trickery. But then he remembered the genuine fear in Valerie's eyes, the way little Daniel had tried to be the man of the house at 4 years old, and the threadbare but carefully mended clothes the children wore. "They're staying until the storm passes, Hank. That's final." As he trudged back to the house, Quinn couldn't help wondering if his hands might be right to be suspicious. After all, what did he really know about Valerie Harris? When Quinn returned to the ranch house, he found it transformed. The floors had been swept, the dishes washed, and Valerie was at the table, bent over one of his shirts, needle flashing as she mended a tear he hadn't even noticed. The older children were occupied with tasks. Emma was peeling potatoes, the twins were stacking firewood, and Sarah was carefully setting the table with his mismatched plates. "You didn't have to do all this," Quinn said, stamping snow from his boots. Valerie looked up, a strand of chestnut hair falling across her cheek. "It's the least we can do for your hospitality. Besides, idle hands make for restless children." That evening, after the children were asleep, Quinn and Valerie sat at the table, a lamp burning low between them. Outside, the storm continued unabated, battering the sturdy log walls of the ranch house. "May I ask you something, Mrs. Harris?" Quinn said, his voice low so as not to wake the children. "Valerie, please," she corrected gently. "And yes, you may. Why Oregon? It's a hard journey, even in good weather." With winter coming, he left the thought unfinished. Valerie's fingers twisted in her lap. The truth is, I had no choice. After Thomas died, men came calling almost immediately, offering marriage, they said, but what they really wanted was a ready-made family to work their farms without having to pay wages. Her voice hardened. One particular gentleman was quite insistent. The sheriff suggested I might want to leave town before there was trouble. Quinn felt a surge of anger on her behalf. This man threatened you. Not in so many words, Valerie replied. But when a man with power in the town starts spreading rumors about a widow's virtue, there are ways to make life unbearable. My cousin's offer came just in time. Quinn nodded slowly, understanding dawning. It wasn't uncommon for widows to find themselves in impossible situations, especially young, beautiful widows with property men might covet. And now the broken wagon, the early storm. His voice trailed off. God works in mysterious ways, Mr. Quincy, Valerie said with a sad smile. Though I confess, when I saw your light through the storm, I prayed you would be a kind man. The sincerity in her voice banished any lingering doubts Quinn might have harbored. Whatever Hank and the others might think, Valerie Harris was no con artist. She was a mother fighting desperately to protect her children. You'll stay until the storm passes, Quinn said firmly. And then we'll see about getting your wagon fixed. What neither of them acknowledged was the unspoken reality. If the storm continued much longer, they might be facing the prospect of Valerie and her children wintering at the Double Q. Days stretched into a week, and still the storm showed no signs of abating. It would lull, giving them hope, only to return with renewed fury. Quinn made daily trips to check on his cattle, but otherwise, they were effectively trapped at the ranch house. In that week, something remarkable happened. The house, which had stood empty of laughter since Quinn's grandfather died, came alive. The children, initially shy and fearful, began to bloom under the security of shelter and regular meals. Emma, the eldest, followed Quinn everywhere, asking intelligent questions about the ranch. The twins, James and Joseph, invented elaborate games that involved saving the ranch from rustlers or Indians. Sarah, quiet and thoughtful, took to drawing pictures in the margins of Quinn's ledger books, with his permission. And little Daniel attached himself to Quinn like a shadow, solemnly imitating everything from the way he drank his coffee to how he sat in his chair. Valerie watched this transformation with mixed emotions. On one hand, her heart swelled to see her children happy and secure for the first time since their father's death. On the other, she knew this was temporary, a brief respite before they continued their journey west. Becoming attached to Quinn Quincy and his ranch would only make the inevitable departure more painful. Yet she couldn't help being drawn to the young rancher. He was unlike any man she had met. Gentle with her children, respectful of her, and possessed of a quiet confidence that came from making his own way in the world. She found herself looking forward to their evening conversations after the children were asleep, when they would sit by the fire and talk of everything and nothing. On the 8th day, the storm finally broke. Brilliant sunshine reflected blindingly off the snow-covered landscape, and for the first time, Valerie could see the full extent of the Double Q Ranch. The barn and corrals, the bunkhouse where the hands stayed, the rolling pastures now blanketed in white, and in the distance, the purple shadows of mountains against the horizon. It's beautiful, she breathed, standing on the porch beside Quinn. It is, he agreed, though when she glanced at him, she found him looking not at the landscape, but at her. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something electric passed between them. Then Emma called from inside, breaking the spell. I should probably ride out today, see about your wagon, Quinn said, his voice suddenly gruff. If it can be salvaged, we can haul it back here for repairs. Valerie nodded, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach. With the storm over, there was no reason to delay their journey. Yet the thought of leaving the Double Q, leaving Quinn, filled her with unexpected dread. Quinn rode out with two of his hands, following Valerie's directions to where they had abandoned their wagon. They returned at dusk, grim-faced. The good news is we found your wagon, Quinn told Valerie as he stamped snow from his boots. The bad news is the axle is completely shattered. We salvaged what supplies we could, but the wagon itself isn't worth saving. I see, Valerie said faintly, sinking into a chair. Without a wagon, how would they reach Oregon? And even if they could find passage with another party, The mountain passes would surely be closed by now. Quinn knelt beside her chair, his blue eyes earnest. Valerie, I've been thinking. The nearest town with a proper stagecoach is Buffalo, 30 miles from here. Even if we could get you there, traveling by stagecoach with 5 children in winter would be costly and dangerous. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be for you and the children to winter here at the Double Q. Her eyes widened. Quinn, we couldn't impose. It's not an imposition, he interrupted. The children are no trouble. In fact, he glanced over to where the 5 Harris children were playing a quiet game by the fire. In fact, they've brought life back to this place. And you've been more than pulling your weight with the cooking and mending. He didn't say what they both knew, that in just over a week, they had fallen into a comfortable rhythm, almost like a real family. That the loneliness that had plagued them both, hers from grief, his from isolation, had eased in each other's company. In the spring, Quinn continued, when the pass is clear, I'll personally see to it that you and the children reach Oregon safely. I promise. Valerie looked into his eyes and saw something there that made her heart flutter. Hope, perhaps, or something deeper. She thought of the long, dangerous journey still ahead, of arriving in Oregon to live in her cousin's cramped quarters, of the uncertain future that awaited them. Thank you, Quinn, she said softly. We accept your offer. That night, after the children were asleep, Valerie sat at the table, composing a letter to her cousin in Oregon, explaining the delay. Quinn sat across from her, whittling a small wooden horse for Daniel. May I ask you something? Valerie said, setting down her pen. Quinn looked up, his hand stilling. Of course. Why are you doing this for us? Taking in 6 strangers, feeding us, now offering to let us stay the winter. It's more than simple kindness. Quinn was silent for a long moment, the only sound the crackle of the fire. Finally, he set down his knife and the half-finished horse. When I was 16, my parents died in a fire in Chicago. My grandfather was my only living relative. He took me in, taught me ranching, gave me a purpose when I was lost. His voice grew soft with memory. Before he died, he made me promise 2 things, to make the Double Q thrive, and to never turn away someone in need, just as he hadn't turned me away. He met her eyes across the table. So you see, I'm just keeping a promise. But there was something in his gaze that told Valerie it was more than that, much more. And as she held his gaze, she felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire. Winter settled over the Double Q ranch, transforming the landscape into a vast, white wilderness. Valerie and her children adapted to ranch life with surprising ease. The children, bundled in warm clothes Quinn had ridden to Buffalo to purchase, learned to feed chickens, collect eggs, and help with simple chores. Even little Daniel had his tasks, solemnly carrying kindling for the fire each morning. Valerie discovered a talent for ranch management, helping Quinn with his accounts and record-keeping, skills she had developed helping her husband with his carpentry business. In the evenings, she taught the children their lessons at the kitchen table, while Quinn watched with quiet admiration. Christmas approached, bringing with it a festive atmosphere despite their isolated circumstances. Quinn and the children ventured into the woods to cut a small pine tree, which they set up in the corner of the main room. Valerie and Emma fashioned ornaments from pine cones, bits of ribbon, and colorful scraps of fabric. On Christmas Eve, after the children had hung their stockings and been tucked into bed with promises of Santa's imminent arrival, Quinn and Valerie sat alone by the fire, the room bathed in the warm glow of candles and firelight. I have something for you, Quinn said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red ribbon, the same ribbon he'd ridden through a snowstorm to Buffalo to find, knowing it would match the dress Valerie had brought with her. Quinn, you shouldn't have, Valerie protested, though her eyes shone with pleasure. I didn't get you anything. You've given me more than you know, he interrupted gently. Please, open it. With trembling fingers, Valerie untied the ribbon and unwrapped the paper. Inside lay a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. When she opened it, she found it empty, waiting for a miniature portrait or lock of hair. It was my mother's, Quinn explained. My grandfather saved it for me. I've been keeping it for. He hesitated. For the right person. Valerie looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Quinn, I can't accept this. It's too precious. Please, he said, taking her hand in his. I want you to have it. To remember this Christmas, whatever the future brings. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted between them. Quinn leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, Valerie met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that began hesitantly but quickly deepened with months of unspoken longing. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. Quinn rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I'm falling in love with you, Valerie Harris," he whispered. "With you and those 5 amazing children. And I'm terrified of spring coming and taking you away from me." Valerie's heart raced. She had known for weeks that her feelings for Quinn went far beyond gratitude, but hearing him confess his own feelings made it real and complicated. "Quinn," she began, her voice wavering, "my children have already lost one father. I can't ask them to start over again, to form attachments that might be broken. And my cousin is expecting us. I'm not asking for promises," Quinn said, taking her hands in his. "I'm just asking for a chance. For us to see where this might lead, here in this home we've made together this winter." Valerie looked around the room, at the Christmas tree they had decorated together, at the stockings hanging by the fire, at the evidence of their intertwined lives, and felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since Thomas died. "Yes," she whispered, squeezing his hands. "Let's see where this leads." As winter deepened, so did the bond between Quinn and the Harris family. January brought bitterly cold temperatures that kept them mostly indoors, but no one seemed to mind. The ranch house, once so sparse and utilitarian, had become a true home under Valerie's touch. Curtains now adorned the windows, quilts brightened the beds, and the kitchen hummed with activity from dawn until dusk. Quinn taught the twins to play chess, spent hours reading to Sarah, and took Daniel with him on short trips to the barn, perched in front of him on his horse. But it was with Emma, the eldest, that he formed a special bond. The serious 10-year-old shadowed him as he did his ranch accounts, absorbing everything with a quick intelligence that reminded him of her mother. "Do you think I could run a ranch someday, Quinn?" Emma asked one evening as they calculated feed requirements for the cattle. "I don't see why not," Quinn replied. "You've got a good head for numbers, and you're not afraid of hard work. Those are the 2 most important things." Emma beamed at the compliment, then grew serious again. "But Mama says girls can't own property without a husband." Quinn frowned. "That's often true, legally speaking. But the world is changing, Emma. By the time you're grown, who knows? Besides, there are ways around such things. My own grandmother ran this ranch for years after my grandfather was injured, though officially it was in his name." "Do you think we'll stay here?" Emma asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Instead of going to Oregon? I like it here. And Mama smiles more with you than she did with Papa, even before he got sick." The question caught Quinn off guard. He and Valerie had been careful not to discuss their growing feelings in front of the children, not wanting to raise hopes that might be dashed. But children were perceptive, especially one as observant as Emma. "I don't know, sweetheart," he answered honestly. "That's for your mama to decide. But I hope you know that whatever happens, you and your brothers and sister will always have a friend in me." Emma studied his face with an intensity that belied her years. "You love her, don't you?" Quinn swallowed hard. "Yes, Emma, I do." "Good," she said with the decisive simplicity of childhood. "Because she loves you too. I can tell." That night, Quinn lay awake long after the house had fallen silent, thinking about Emma's words. Did Valerie love him? They had shared kisses and tender moments over the past weeks, but she had never spoken of love. And always, the specter of Oregon loomed over them, the cousin waiting, the promise of a teaching position, the new start Valerie had planned before fate brought her to his door. February brought a brief thaw that allowed Quinn to ride to Buffalo for supplies and mail. Among the letters was one for Valerie, from her cousin in Oregon. Quinn handed it to her with a sense of foreboding, watching as she broke the seal and read the contents, her expression giving nothing away. That evening, after the children were asleep, Valerie found Quinn in the barn, checking on a mare that was due to foal. "My cousin writes that the school position is still available," she said without preamble. "She says we should aim to arrive by late April, when the passes should be clear." Quinn straightened, his heart sinking. "I see. She also writes that there's a widower there, a shopkeeper, who has expressed interest in meeting me." Valerie's voice was carefully neutral. "She thinks he would make a suitable match." Quinn's jaw tightened. "And what do you think?" Valerie stepped closer, her face illuminated by the lantern hanging from a beam. "I think," she said softly, "that I already know what it's like to be married to a good, kind man who I respect and care for deeply." "Thomas," Quinn said, the name like ashes in his mouth. "Yes." Valerie took another step closer. "And I've learned something these past months, Quinn. I've learned that there's something beyond respect and companionship. Something I never had with Thomas, as good a husband as he was." Hope flickered in Quinn's chest. "And what's that?" "Love," Valerie whispered, reaching up to touch his face. "The kind that makes your heart race when he enters a room. The kind that makes you lie awake at night, imagining a future together. The kind that makes you willing to change all your carefully laid plans because the thought of leaving him is more painful than any uncertainty the future might hold." Quinn caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek. "Valerie, are you saying—" "I'm saying I love you, Quinn Quincy. And so do my children. The thought of leaving this ranch, leaving you, breaks my heart in a way I didn't think possible after Thomas died." Joy surged through Quinn like a physical force. He pulled Valerie into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an embrace that made her laugh even as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Marry me," he said when he finally set her down, his voice rough with emotion. "Stay here, not just until spring, but forever. Let me be a father to your children, a husband to you. Let us build something beautiful together." Valerie's answer was a kiss that left no doubt as to her feelings. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, she said, "Yes, Quinn. 1,000 times yes." Their wedding took place in early March, a small ceremony in the Buffalo church with only the preacher, his wife, and Quinn's ranch hands as witnesses. The children were there too, of course, Emma standing proudly beside her mother, the twins scrubbed clean and solemn in their new suits, Sarah scattering wildflowers she had insisted on gathering despite the snow, and Daniel carrying the rings on a small pillow, his face a study in concentration. As Valerie and Quinn spoke their vows, the late winter sunlight streamed through the church's stained glass windows, painting them in jewel-toned light, a promise of the bright future that awaited them. The Double Q Ranch thrived in the years that followed. With Valerie's help, Quinn expanded the operation, adding sheep as well as cattle, and establishing a reputation for quality that brought buyers from as far away as Chicago. The Harris children grew up strong and confident, as much at home on horseback as they were in the schoolroom Valerie established in what had once been the ranch's storage shed. Emma, true to her early ambition, became Quinn's right hand in the business side of the ranch, eventually taking over the books entirely when she turned 16. The twins, James and Joseph, proved to have a natural affinity for animal husbandry, developing breeding programs that improved both the cattle and sheep herds. Sarah's artistic talents blossomed, her sketches of ranch life and Wyoming landscapes eventually finding their way to galleries in Denver and beyond. And Daniel, the baby who had tried so hard to be the man of the house, grew into a thoughtful young man who combined his father's carpentry skills with a vision for architecture that would one day transform the Double Q's modest buildings into a showcase of Western design. 2 more children joined the family, a son, Michael, born just before their first anniversary, and a daughter, Catherine, 2 years later. The big ranch house, once so empty and austere, rang with the laughter and squabbles of 7 children, the air filled with the smells of Valerie's cooking and the sounds of Quinn's deep voice reading aloud by the fire each evening. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn took Valerie for a ride to the spot where they had first met. Not the literal location, which was miles away where her wagon had broken down, but the ranch house door where she had stood with her 5 children, soaked and frightened and desperately hoping for kindness. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. "Not going to Oregon? Taking a chance on a young rancher instead of that shopkeeper your cousin had in mind?" Valerie leaned against his shoulder, her hand finding his as naturally as breathing. "Not for a single moment," she said. "That storm was the best thing that ever happened to us. It blew us right where we were always meant to be." Quinn squeezed her hand, remembering the frightened widow who had appeared at his door a decade earlier, and marveling at the confident, joyful woman she had become. Or perhaps, he thought, she had always been that woman, just waiting for the right circumstances and the right partner to fully bloom. "I love you, Mrs. Quincy," he said, using the name she had carried now for longer than she had been a Harris. "And I love you, Mr. Quincy," she replied, her voice as warm as the summer evening. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the years to come." As they sat hand in hand, the door behind them opened, and children's voices spilled out, arguing, laughing, calling for their parents. Valerie and Quinn exchanged a smile, the kind that comes only from years of shared joy and hardship, and rose together to join their family, leaving the porch empty, but the house full of the love that had begun that stormy night when a poor widow and 5 kids found safety at a kind rancher's door.